Welcome to this episode that spotlights on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, also known as the AfCFTA. The AfCFTA is a flagship project of the African Union which aims to integrate Africa into a single continental market of goods and services. It also aims to create free movement of business persons as well as investment. With a market size of 1.3 billion people and a combined GDP estimated at 3.4 trillion US dollars, the intra-Africa trade is very low at only 16%. The AfCFTA has entered into force on the 1st of January 2021, although no meaningful trade has yet taken place. This is due to pending issues such as rules of origin and finalization of the tariff offers. As we say in trade, government negotiates trade agreements while private sector do the actual trading. How can then Namibia take advantage of the AfCFTA? We sit with Namibia Trade Forum CEO, Ms. Stacey Pinto, as she highlights to us the recently launched awareness campaign on the AfCFTA targeting private sector, particularly SMEs, women and youth. Let's take a look. Good morning, Stacey.
Good morning, Maria. How are you?
I'm fine. And thank you so much for joining us at our ATF Trade Policy Talk. Today, we are talking about the AfCFTA. The Namibia Trade Forum is rolling out an awareness campaign around the AfCFTA. Maybe if you can just give us a breakdown, highlight on what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for that, and thank you for your time. You're right, the AfCFTA right now is a buzzword for most people, for most countries, for the private sector, for businesses. And the question on everybody's lips is how can we benefit from it? For you and I that work in the trade space, I think it's fairly easy. We understand what the agreement is about. We understand what it's trying to do. But for producers, for manufacturers, for Namibia as a country, we absolutely need to be very intentional about sharing information about, firstly, what is the AfCFTA? But most importantly, what does it avail for countries like Namibia? What are our strengths? But also critically, how do businesses in Namibia here and now today start preparing to trade with other African countries? And that means a lot. It's not just about us being able to send product outside. It also means that other African nations, products will be in Namibia. So how do we start to manage that? How do we start to prepare for that kind of trade? And so for the Namibia Trade Forum, obviously under the ambit of the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, with very much appreciated support from the UNDP, felt it important for us to start sharing awareness, to start talking to the entire country about what the AfCFTA is, what does it avail, and how can businesses start to prepare. So that's what we've been doing. So far we've done that awareness. We did the launch in Windhoek, and then we've been in the north, particularly at the Ongwediva Trade Fair, as well as Oshikango.
And of course, the key word here is preparing yourself as a business, sensitizing, because we are aware that the agreement, entered into force 2021 January, but there's no trading yet. But at least now we need to make sure you prepare that once we make it part of the law, you sort of know what to do.
Indeed.
Yeah. Maybe what have you seen as some of the successes in terms of your engagement, particularly, especially with the level of businesses that are coming to the platforms?
Thank you for that. So for us, what has been absolutely encouraging, or an experience that we're very, very grateful for, is that we get to meet a lot of businesses. For you and I sitting here in Windhoek, we assume we know everybody that is a producer and a manufacturer, but that is not correct. There are amazing people who are doing amazing stuff that are just not in our radar. And for us as an institution, I think President always says this, that we want a Namibia where we all go together. It's no point us talking about the AfCFTA and yet there's a bracket of manufacturers or producers that are not involved in the conversation. So for me, the success that we see is that we get to meet these businesses. We get to see where they are and talk them through, well, this is what the potential next steps looks like. This is who you can plug into to get that kind of support. This is what you need to think about. And I think the ripple effect of that information is this, that these businesses that we meet go out and share the information further, which is what we want. So I think that in itself has been very, very good and encouraging, and has allowed us to really get a grasp of where the producers are and what they're doing.
And I think one of the interesting things we're talking about in Godiva was the dry food sector.
Indeed.
And meeting manufacturers, especially SMEs, already preparing to launch into Africa by looking at what is feasible. And dry food is such a interesting concept, and I think we're learning quite a lot.
It is. And I think what's interesting about that is that when we go out in these regions, even when we talk about dry foods, all of this stuff is things that our people do as a way of life. And what switches it, the trade perspective, is the ability to say, you're doing great, but you could actually scale up and export. So we're not asking them to do something they don't know how to do. This is their way of life. But how do we plug into that, put life in it, and be able to make it exportable?
And this is, of course, for me, I think, under correction, the first time Namibia is launching a campaign of such, in terms of international trade agreement. And I just maybe want to find out what have been some of the challenges. Of course, there are always, the challenges. Some are solutions, but immediately challenges that you can highlight.
I want to take that sort of two-pronged. Maybe the one route is the realization that we have a long way to go. We meet a lot of businesses, we meet a lot of products, and we wish we were literally plugging in and playing, but that's not the case. There is a way to go around standards. There is a way to go around packaging. There's a way to go around safety. And so it's figuring out how, as a country, we can start to provide such innovative solutions to help these businesses scale up, to help them become credible, to help them be able to do the checks and the balances. The other one is really simple, but can be a game changer, the language barrier. We have a lot of sort of regions in Namibia, and each of them are represented by different countries. Unfortunately, it's not always that we're able to articulate ourselves properly in that local language, because for me, it's not about me going on a stage and speaking English and telling them this is how you access markets. If the message is not landing, then what we're doing is useless. I think you'll agree with me, even in the North, we had to switch up our program and make it Oshiwambo based. Whether we will have that kind of skill set in the room for every region will be another question. But for me, success lies in the fact that we give information and people understand it in the best way possible. So that's the two things we're trying to manage. Number one, just the quality and the status quo around the products. But from an information point of view, we don't want to always be technical about things. We want to be able to explain the AfCFTA in the most basic of ways, so that somebody walks out the room understanding, after this is what I need to do.
Definitely, and I think the best one was really the Oshikango, looking at the fact that we are next to the border.
Yes.
And what is interesting about Namibia-Angola is that because Angola hasn't been part of the SADC trade protocol, we haven't been able to develop that trade route in its trade format, right? A lot happening, yet not formally. So that quite was very, very interesting, and I think it's a good case study for our informal cross-border trade and upscaling. But of course, there are two ways to getting ready, preparing. For me, I look at it from the products, the businesses we are looking at. But of course, we also like to emphasize institutions. How ready are we as a country in terms of institutions? And I think this is where we need to facilitate trade for the business community. Maybe in your concluding remarks, how do we continue probably the effort of bringing together the stakeholders especially those in trade facilitation. Just to sort of make sure we close some of these gaps that we have. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that's a fantastic question. I always say when we're out in the regions or wherever that not all the answers lie with the NTF. Neither do they lie with the Ministry of Trade. We are an initiator, but there's so many other people who ought to be part of this journey, because even if we look at the logistics cycle of a product, maybe let's not even say logistics, let's just say life cycle of a product, from when it's conceptualized to when it's on a shelf. Just that chain involves so much. It involves standards, it involves financing, it involves packaging, it involves logistics, it involves customs, it involves, So this is something that absolutely requires us to hold hands at an institutional level. I'm very happy to say that NAMRA has been on board, the NSI has been on board, but we could broaden this much wider. I think you remember at the launch we had the Ministry of Works and Transport, and they were very, very grateful for being included in the conversation, because from a logistics perspective, they're the right institution. So this is a call out to as many institutions as possible. If you're involved, your NAMPOS, NAMRA, corridor groups, your banking institutions, your finances, all of us need to come together to be able to say, okay, this is what Namibia's comparative advantage is. Maybe let's focus on 4 industries. How can we help them scale up? How can we help move product across the continent? So this is a call out, and thank you very, very much for that. I do hope that as this video is being watched, more institutions get encouraged to get in touch and get on the bandwagon.
No, thank you so much. And I always like to be a bit controversial. And you mentioned the banks, and at the launch, my colleague from UNDP said, we don't even have, the banks are not issuing letter of credit. And I thought that was already something that is important to know. So, just a fun fact out there.
Yes, it is very, very true. But again, private sector also have a good case to prove. Banks are business institutions. We have to put our ducks in a row so that when we pitch that idea, it makes sense. So there's work on both sides.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Should you have more questions around the AfCFTA and how you can get involved, please do give us your comments in the comment section below. From me, Maria, see you next time.